Well, goodness, it looks like it's 12 o'clock, and I guess we're going to have to go ahead and get started now. Um, my name is Russ, and I'm hosting the meeting. I was the project manager for the show, and so anything that goes wrong is my fault. Oh, well, bear with us. This is a first time for all of us, so we're looking forward to having some fun, and you know, hopefully you'll really enjoy what we have put together for you. At this time, I'm going to step out of here and go invite Fede uh, in to give an opening talk. And so bear with us while we transition. Okay, so I'm back, and as you can see, there's Fede, and I'm just going to let Fede go ahead and start talking. Hi, Fede. Thanks for
Hi,
opening up for us, and so I'm going to mute myself now.
sure. Hello, hi everyone. Welcome. It's been a year, hey? So when I started running this MA was the end of summer 2019. And I'd say I was quite ready for a challenge. It was the first time for me doing something like that. Uh, but this wasn't exactly the kind of challenge I was expecting. And I think I can say the same thing for this year cohort. And they have done an incredible job in pushing through this year. It's been insane they pulled it off. They've been like absolutely, absolutely outstanding. And uh, when lockdown started, there was a long read on The Guardian by Rebecca Solnit. And there was one part of that article that really, really touched me. And I want to share it with you. It goes like this. When a caterpillar enters its chrysalis, it dissolves itself quite literally into liquid. In this state, what was a caterpillar and will be a butterfly is neither one nor the other. It's a sort of living soup. Within this living soup are the imaginal cells that will catalyze its transformation into winged maturity. May the best among us, the most visionary, the most inclusive, be the imaginal cells, for now we are in the soup. And, I felt for the good part exactly in this sort of liquid state. And I know this is not just my feeling, it's shared between most of us, I think, maybe between all of us. And for many months, our experience of the world has been divided between two windows, essentially. The black mirror, the first one, is the one that I'm talking you through. It's a bunch of square inches with a digital eye on top. And then there is the one looking at a tiny fragment of the external world that we were allowed to see. And from my window here, I can't really see the stars. The word desire comes from Latin, and it means missing the stars. It comes from an era where people were looking at the stars to find answers. And when the stars were covered, they felt lost. They didn't know what to do anymore. And we are all missing some stars right now. And there is this sense of longing for something new, for something better. I was missing watching the stars so much this summer that I literally made a small game about it. It's nothing special, nothing, incredible. It's just a bunch of things put together in Unity to get that feeling of sitting and watching a meteor shower. But that space has been important for me. And I believe Games are a way to connect to each other. They are these magical spaces where we can experience, we can try new things, we can have conversation, we can cry out our feelings, just have a little bit of fun and release sometimes, maybe watch the stars together. And games might help us find those stars again and imagine new ways of living. Maybe we need to rethink who we are and create new connections. Games and play might be a way to do that, a way to try things when everything looks so impossibly fluid and ephemeral. As Rebecca Solnit said, yes, I'm quoting her again, and I don't feel ashamed about it. The stars we are given, the constellation we make, that is to say, stars exist in the cosmos, but constellations are the imaginary lines we draw between them, the readings we give the skies, the story we tell. We need to keep inventing new ways of connecting dots. It's not certain that we'll find answers or solutions, but at least we will have traveled and we will have kept staying united. One final note before I start this. Massive thanks to all the students for having organized this. They worked so hard for making this happen. And when we started, we had no idea how to do that entirely online. Thanks to Kate Geller and to the communications team for all the help. And really to everyone who has encouraged us, listened to us, helped us out. You never make things all by yourself. Collaboration is key, especially in these times. The time for the hero's journey has ended. Maybe it has never really started. Now it's time for caring for each other, for working together. Keep exploring, keep changing, make games. Welcome and thank you.
Wow, thank you, Fede. That was fantastic. And I really appreciate your words of encouragement. This has been an incredible challenge. So at this time, I'm going to invite our first speaker. And Fede, I'm going to send you back to the breakout room. So sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, technical difficulty. I can't seem to send you into the breakout room. So give me just a moment. Oh, you'll have to send yourself back. You have control of that. Technical difficulties. Yeah, you'll just have to go down there. So, all right, fantastic. At this time, I'm going to send a message to Shani to come out. And
Russ, could you spotlight Charmaine as well, please?
Oh yes, I will actually have to unspotlight you. And we'll see how that works out. I'm going to pop in there and grab her. Hi, Shani.
Hi, Russ.
We crossed paths. You left when I was going in. So
I see.
I'm going to check really fast to make sure we're doing okay on the YouTube side, just to make sure our interpreter is where she needs to be. And it looks like yes. Fantastic.
All right, lovely.
All right, so everyone, I'm going to just briefly say this is Shani, and let Shani take over and introduce herself and begin her presentation. Take it away, Shani. I'm going to go and mute myself.
Thank you very much, Russ. As Russ says, I am Shani, or Shani Thompson, and I will be talking about my game Artisan Bay. So I have a couple of slides to go through, so I shall begin. Right, so my game is called Artisan Bay, and it's played on itch. I made it using Unity. So my journey into game development is quite an eclectic one. I started off in fashion design as like a seamstress and pattern cutter, and then decided that actually I'd like to try teaching. And so I did tutoring and mentoring and youth work. And then I decided that I would like to do more research into the ethical and sustainable aspects of design. And so I did an MA in design and environment, which made me really want to explore even more about the way that people use things, and that kind of led me to independent games and playable experiences. And so today I'm going to be talking about my game Artisan Bay, which was directly inspired by my dissertation question, which was how is the abstract knowledge of crafts and material properties shared with the user in simulation role-play video games? So quite a lengthy title, but I really wanted to look at crafts and materials and how in simulation role-play video games they are kind of portrayed to players. It was really important to me to explore that. So I felt that that Grow, Dickinson, Pagnuti, Wardrip, and Matthias really defined what crafting is when they said that in games it is a collection of mechanics which enable a player to create virtual objects. So that was the way that I developed my game. So developments from my dissertation, obviously the inclusion of crafting and material properties. My research analysed multiple avenues, including the points of views of players, the intentions of the developers, and the social cultural influences. So when I say cultural influences, in games, there are the cultural influences that developers put in there because of their own backgrounds or intentionally, but there's also, especially in creative games, those that players bring to the games because of their own like desires, likes, and personal backgrounds, which led me into kind of thinking about the ethics and the choices and the considerations that we allow players to have, because obviously in a game there are rules, there are limitations. And so that led me further into thinking about an economical structure and their influence on craft. So as I go through my game, you will notice that it doesn't have an economical structure. And the reason for that was because the more I researched it, the more I found that actually it changed the value of the crafts based on my own preconceptions. And I thought, that's not what I want for my game. I want people to explore and just experiment and find their own value, not for me to put a value on it. And this made me think about removing the barriers between crafters and crafts, because the thing about video games is that, especially because they are a simplification in a way of real world mechanics, you can remove the barriers for not being able to find rare materials or expensive materials or not having certain tools. And I added this because I felt it was important to mention. In my game, you will notice that almost all the characters are wearing some sort of mask. This was originally included in my game because I was looking into the idea of that when you are crafting, there is lots of dust and particles which you breathe in. And obviously lockdown happened, and so now masks are a very common part of fashion, but that was not why it was included in my game. It just happens to coincide with what's going on now, ironically. So in my game, there is a narrative element, where you discuss and you reveal the history of the town. You get to hear crafters' opinions and explore some of the material properties within the game. So, for example, the town is called Artisan Bay, but it was actually a mining village, and that's why there's so many raw materials around. And so that kind of sets the context of the game, why you can find so many tools and everything just scattered around the world. And the mayor of the town is kind of like a dabbler, and he likes lots of different crafts, so he's always very excited about everything that's going on and like telling you to talk to people. And so I really wanted to bring in that aspect of crafting, that community that crafting creates. So moving on to the main part of my game, which is the mini game mechanics. I wanted the mini games to blur the lines between playing and gaming. So as I said, games have an aspect where they have rules that limit what the player can do. And I wanted to have some mini games that included rules that limited the player, but some that felt rather freeing, like there weren't a lot of limitations or rules that stopped the players from doing certain things. So first of all, I have a crafting UI system. So you go around, you collect items in the world, and they go in your inventory. And then from that, you can actually create different items that appear in your house where the little hammers are placed. So that was the crafting UI. It's very simple and quite classic of most video games, but I didn't want to change it too much. I did have it so that you can actually see all of the objects all the time, and you can see whether you have the items or not. And if you press make and you don't have the items, then it just won't make it. It's quite a simple interface. So the pottery mini game is one that I am particularly proud of, because even though it's quite simple in terms of how you engage with it, it was actually really fun to make, and it is still one of my favorite ones to test. So it is you left click to make the pottery layers wider and right click to make the pottery layers smaller. And you can even hold down and drag the mouse, and it will do, if you're left clicking, it will make the pottery layers wider, and so on and so forth. I also added an element where you could actually change the clay type, and it is very simple. It's just rows, but together they kind of create the illusion of pottery. And then you've got the wheel animation that makes it look like it's all spinning. And I really wanted to take inspiration from real world pottery and try and see how much of that I could put in the game while not having the limitations of materials. So the drawing and painting actually originate from almost identical codes, and then branched off into different aesthetics. So with the drawing, you can only use small triangle pixels, and you have different shades of gray. Whereas with the painting, each brush has a different shape when you paint something on your canvas, and you can pick different colors. And then when you save it, it will send it to the picture frames in your house. So these were quite interesting to work with, and really quite challenging to think about how to limit them, but also how to push the boundaries to allow players to feel like they had the freedom of kind of being artistic. But I also wanted to make them a little bit challenging, so that whether you were a great artist or not the greatest artist in the world, it equally challenged you to kind of create something beautiful. Even for me, like I drew all the artwork for this game, and as you can see, my boat is not the greatest boat in the world, but that's what made these mini games quite fun, because it never turned out the way you expected. So the knitting mini game was, I think, the most challenging, because I wanted to capture some aspect of knitting from real world crafts, and trying to put that into a mini game, I found it really, really challenging. So in the end, I decided that I wanted to capture the rhythmic nature of knitting. So the flow that you get into once you understand the pattern and you know what stitches you're doing. And so this game is modeled after like classic rhythm and music games. And you've got the K, P, Y, B keys on the keyboard that stand for knit, purl, yarn over, and bobbling. And once you get into the rhythm, it is quite easy to kind of like master this game. And based on your score, when you exit the game or when the game ends and exits for you, you have a little knitted item appear on your bed in the world. So I'm quite proud of this game as well, but it was quite a challenge to get it working and then to get the keys falling in the right order to match with the music. But yeah, it's quite fun. So when I did my research, I wanted to think about the player input. So I made up a calculation to calculate the player input percentage, focusing on the engagement time. So how long players actually were part of the process of clicking or actually doing something in order to produce the item. And then the craft time was how long it took after the players finished engaging for the item to be made. And for my particular game, I really wanted to have all of my games be at least 80% player input. So for me, I removed a lot of the kind of animations that are in classical crafting games that you would have to show the item being made. Not because I think that those are wrong or bad. I think they're a fantastic idea because they show an element of crafting that's really fantastic and reflective of the real world. But because for my particular game, it was about player engagement. And so that's why I didn't have a lot of those things. The only animations I had were ones to just kind of replicate the craft while the players were engaging. In addition to this, I also had a skills panel because I realized that there was no mark of kind of how far you'd come from when you started each task. So the mini games actually all fall into artistry. So it doesn't matter which mini game you decide to pursue. You could pursue one or all of them and your artistry will go up bit by bit. The making is specifically related to the crafting UI, and the foraging is related to the items you've actually collected in the world. And then the social is related to talking to NPCs. I only included skills that were things that were actually part of the game. So the skills were actually put in last because I didn't want to have them first and have them be things that I was forcing the player to do that weren't really relevant to the way that the game had developed. So they were kind of one of the last things to be decided and put in. So yes, that is my presentation. Are there any questions about the game or anything I've said or anything anyone would like me to expand on?
Hi, Shani.
Hi.
I've been kind of monitoring the YouTube channel, and at this time, it doesn't appear to have any questions. So let's see here. Oh, okay. There is one. I'd like to know more about how and why you did/modified the economic structure in the game as, say, compared to real work economic structures.
There were lots of kind of like different reasons. So one of the main reasons I said was that I didn't want to I didn't want to give a value to the crafts based on my own personal value of crafting. And I also didn't want to make it so that because some of the materials are rare, but I didn't want to make it so that they were inaccessible to certain players, because I feel like that reflection of the real world was not what I wanted to bring to my game. I wanted it to be open and accessible to anyone who played it. So in a way, it was kind of the thought process of wanting to create that idealized world where anyone can do anything and be anything and make all the things.
Okay. There are a couple more questions just popped in, so just give me a moment and I'll read them off.
It's fine.
The first one is, who is your game aimed at?
So my game is more aimed at people who enjoy crafting, but maybe don't. So my game is a short game. It's not something that you would play long term. So it's aimed at people who like crafting, but just want to kind of like try something a little bit new, but something that they know they don't have to commit to for a long time. So just a little bit of fun, something they could like pick up and put down at any point. So I was thinking about people who maybe enjoy games like farming games or crafting or other crafting games or exploration games.
Okay, and one more question. This one's from Alex. Did it feel therapeutic to work on a passion project like this during lockdown?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. It definitely made it easier when certain code wasn't working or something broke to kind of keep continuing, because it was something I was passionate about and I really had this idea in mind of what I wanted to achieve by the end. And so it really made it easier to keep going when it felt like I was hitting a brick wall constantly.
Okay. Well, you've been going for about 15 minutes or so, and for that, thank you very much. We are going to take a break, so we're going to just go mute and whatnot, so we can switch out our interpreters and give the next presenter an opportunity, me, to prepare our slides and whatnot. So everyone who's watching via YouTube, just be patient with us. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. Shani, you can go ahead and head back to the breakout room on your own. I can't control that. So thank you very much. See you all in just a few minutes. Hello, everyone. I am back, and hi, the interpreter is following along very well. So I'm going to just really quick set you to be spotlight so that you show up when I do my slideshow. All right. So I'm Russ, as it said in my name there. I am also a student for the IGPED show, and I'm also been the project manager for this. So like I said before, anything that goes wrong is on me. So bear with us and sit back, and I will start my show now. I'm going to share my screen. Getting better at this. Okay, so my topic is encouraging replayability through the use of unscripted events, and that sounds boring. Really, what I wanted to do was kind of cover the idea of exploring options in games. So why this? Well, when I was younger, I was fascinated with science fiction and fantasy novels, and I loved reading them. I could get absorbed into them for hours. Well, the problems is once I'd read the book, I never wanted to read it again. If I tried reading it again, I would get, to the point where I could remember everything I'd read, and the book became boring. For me, however, I've recently found out that I'm in the minority on this. Most people can reread books for various reasons, usually a sense of familiarity or comfort. When I played video games, however, I didn't have this problem because of the inherent nature of games and how they offer us choices, and we can choose different paths or different attempts to complete the process. The stories still tend to get boring, and you end up, mashing the button trying to get through the dialogue a lot. But you can still play games more than once and still get a lot of enjoyment out of that process. So a few years back, procedural generation came on the scene. Many of you probably have played or heard of No Man's Sky. It's one of the bigger name games at the time that used this. And it really opened up the possibility of play experiences and what that could look like for replay value, because you could choose to do something different and through that choice find something new that you hadn't experienced before. Talking with some of my undergrad professors at the time about the idea of taking that to narrative, and they said, wow, that's a really big ask. Maybe just get through your undergrad and worry about that later. And so I did. This year, in January, I had the opportunity to go and listen to a workshop presentation from Emily Short talking about storylets and how to use those to create dynamic narrative in games. And I was hooked. I thought, this is how we are going to progress narrative development in the direction of changing options based on player input. So I was really excited about that. So I dived into the research as part of the process. The first thing is choices and outcomes. Games provide players with choices, and based on those choices, the outcomes can change. As game designers, we try to limit the amount of outcomes so that we get an enjoyable experience. But those choices have to be meaningful. And, one of the best examples of that is tabletop role-playing games. Because of the collaborative nature of the storytelling that goes on with those games, we see infinite potential for outcomes because they have a game master right there ready to engage and keep track of what the players do, and can bring those choices back as consequences later. Then I looked at replayability. Replayability has different meaning for different players, just as game players have different needs from games. Some players enjoy like reading, the comfort and familiarity that they get from games that they've played before. Whereas like me, I enjoy creating new challenges, trying new things, just seeing what the boundaries are within games. Playing games more than once increases our skill, maybe leads to new ideas on how to, tackle a task. Players tend to become more immersed in how they operate the game, so the controls become more familiar. But studies show that narrative has no change. People don't become more interested or less interested in narrative, and there are various reasons for that. Mainly due to people who enjoy the comfort and people who don't enjoy the repetitive nature of playing the games through again and again. So that was an interesting find. Why does replayability matter? I know that my undergrad professors are probably screaming right now because they love this idea, but replayability means something for both players and developers. Players get more bang for their dollar or pound, and so they get more value from their purchase if they can replay the game. Whereas developers, they need you to play the game more because then you're more likely to purchase downloadable content or make in-game purchases or buy their new games as they are released. So replayability absolutely matters. Tying it all together, choices affect outcomes. More choices means more outcomes. More outcomes means more play. More play means more money and more value for everyone. I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides because the timing is funny. Finally, reverting back to storylets. So this is the meat of the project. And storylets are modular chunks of narrative or events that exist but aren't forced on the player. Instead, they are accessed by players reaching certain states in the game. And those states are reached through choices. Storylet is an event or a menu option or something that is presented to the player. It has prerequisites, so certain conditions must be met. And then there are effects, consequences that go into effect after the storylet is selected or displayed. And those can lead to new storylets being made available. So the chain reacts a little bit. I won't go into the differences on the slide there. You can read that. But one of the most interesting things is that storylets can exist without being attached to a character. So you can have an event waiting for the right character to meet those requirements and then assign that event to that character on the fly. So different choices can lead to different characters performing different tasks, which is something I tried to recreate in this game. So the design approach, I like the iterative approach. However, usually with an iterative approach, you start with a paper prototype. Couldn't do that. The lockdown pandemic situation was just not a safe idea for us to do physical prototypes. So I dove right into an electronic version. I did do some initial testing with functionality, audio, UI, and things like that early on, just to make sure that things were going to function right. But the design approach ended up having to be thrown by the wayside. So, like I said before, the first prototype skipped physical, went right to digital. I also knew that I wasn't going to make all of my assets, didn't have the time or skill set to do all of that. So I made some purchases through the Unity Asset Store, downloaded some free stuff, royalty free, so I don't, I'm not violating anybody's rights. I also decided early on to use the Fungus asset for Unity, which is a fantastic tool. It does really, really well for tracking narrative changes, and it's got great built-in graphic features. However, like many of us have seen, couldn't get a lot of play testers early on. Couldn't get a lot of play testers throughout the process. So we were all kind of, in our own mode, so to speak, and couldn't really break out to test other people's games a lot. So that also affected the iterative approach. Creating NPCs. So I'm going to say hi to Jennifer, who I think is watching. She taught us how to quickly generate non-player characters, give them strengths, personalities, goals, things of that nature. And, that was something that I set out early on to try to create. So I generated 12 characters that could either be victims or killers, and generated relationships between these people, motives for killing one another. And while I wanted to avoid tropes and stereotypes, it turns out they're really, really handy in communicating a lot of information quickly. So I ended up using some easy character design. Then I started work on developing the actual storylets. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to create code that had conditions, an event, and consequences. I wrote the code, had it all ready to go, and then I ran into a problem. The problem is that fungus does not allow access at the level of menus and say commands that I needed to be able to access from my storylets, at least not where I could find how to do this. I was also at this point running out of time for development, and I had to make some executive decisions. So instead of scrapping everything and trying something new, I adjusted how I was addressing storylets and created something internally within the fungus environment to mimic the idea. And so I got it functional. It wasn't as robust as I would have liked, but lesson learned there. So something that came up from all of this was the state machine. Now, I've never done a state machine. I've never researched a state machine, and I didn't really know that I should have, but I should have. Ultimately, a storylet-based system is an extension of a state machine. And so I'm going to actually do some research on that after all of this is done so that I can get more acquainted with it. But basically, it's just a means of tracking variables and using those variables to affect change or present information to players. So definitely something else that I learned and am looking forward to continuing learning about. Multiplicative growth. There's a scope, basically blowing scope. I initially wanted to have 12 non-player characters. That didn't work. It was too much. Looking at all of the math there, I'll boil it down. I would have had to write over 1,300 lines of dialogue for just 12 characters. It wasn't going to work out that way. I didn't have the time. I would need to hire somebody full on to do that work for me. So again, executive decision, I reduced the number of in-play characters to 4. Now, all of those characters I designed are still in the game. They just don't have any depth. That resulted in a much more manageable narrative. Building the finale. So because it's a state-based system, I created variables to track which non-player characters were more likely to kill other non-player characters. This was basically just a rumor mill. Your character, the player character, runs around and spreads gossip. And the more gossip you spread about particular characters, the more likely that they are to get angry at each other. It's kind of basic on the backside, but it grows quickly. So the first NPC to reach maximum anger gets added to a pre-written template. kind of like a Mad Lib, just insert names here, here, and here. And that information is then presented to the player at the end of the game. They're then prompted to go back to the title screen and hopefully play again. Did a little bit more testing at the end. Still didn't get a lot of feedback and could not use that small amount of data to really affect change in the game. So, you know, it is what it is. If this was a full-on production, obviously I wouldn't progress without getting more feedback and more data. So in finale, lessons learned, do more research on your assets, do more research on what it is you're trying to do and what can possibly be affecting it. I actually could have done this game as a text-based game versus a graphical game, but I don't think that that really would have been fun. And ultimately what we're trying to do is make fun games. If I were to reconstruct this entire project from scratch to get all of the features in, it would take me months to do that. And of course, as always, scope creep is a constant problem for game designers. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take questions. So there's David. Hi, David.
Oh, hi, I'm coming out of the darkness there. I've been hiding. So we haven't got any questions yet, just because there's a bit of delay on the stream. So I'll just kind of start asking some questions first.
Okay.
So your prototype that you did was like a murder party type game.
Yeah.
So was that your original idea, or
Yeah.
did you have other ideas? Oh.
No, that was something I actually came up with back in February or March, not long after the workshop with Emily Short. So I really liked the idea and really could see how the branching narrative could go via, you know, just in small little pushes from the player. I mean, I spent lots of time mulling it over and how I was going to do it, but yeah, that was my plan for the final show piece long ago.
Right. Do you think, like, have you got any ideas in your mind about other narratives that you'd like to see this kind of storylets idea adapted to?
Oh gosh, my meat and potatoes, my bread and butter, so to speak, is fantasy RPGs. So I really kind of live in that world of narrative and game construction. I could easily see this being used in a dating simulator. I mean, honestly, let's, you know, just call it what it is. That's a simple way to explore the same kind of topic. And, you know, player clicks things on the menu, and next thing you know, you're dating that single dad down the street, or, you know, that single guy down the road, or whatever. You know, not going to discriminate on, you know, the dating sims. So yeah, it's super adaptable.
Oh, great. We've had a question come through. How do you think a text-based game would have changed the player enjoyment?
See, and that I think is why I avoided the text-based game, even though I thought it would be doable. I wanted to make something that, you know, really had appeal. And with text-based games, there's no wow factor. I mean, I enjoyed them. I grew up playing text-based games, but we have the means to, you know, show, not tell. And I think that really, I don't know, it sends a message that you know, you're putting a little bit more care into the process.
All right, great, yeah. But so someone followed up that question, that if you had to adapt the game for like almost like a text-based format, how would that have changed? How would you have changed some mechanics to make it work?
Oh, well, that would have been easy, because then I wouldn't have had to try to integrate so many assets. I would have just written the code and had it display text. Yeah, I could probably write that code in, you know, a week and have it functional, but it wouldn't have been fun for players or me. And as an indie dev, I want to have fun too. So.
Oh yeah, implementing assets is always the fun part, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Especially when they weren't designed to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, if there's any, let's see if there's any more questions. Oh, literally, just as I was about to say we haven't got any more questions, one has just come up. If you could have included one more feature, what would that be?
I actually wrote code for interactive items, which you can access in the tutorial level. You can click on items. I would have loved to have been able to use those items in my story. So, say a character is allergic to a certain kind of food and you wanted to actually, push someone to, kill another character. You could drop a hint, say, hey, they're allergic to grapes, and then hand them some grapes, really kind of give it more than just a rumor mill gossip spreading kind of feel.
Yeah, that sounds really, yeah, I'd love to see, like, if you take this concept further, like what you do with it. Absolutely. I don't think there are
actually working on a project after I'm done with it.
Oh, yeah, the feeling is too real.
So anyway, I'm not in the light here very good. Hold on.
Okay.
That's a little bit, oh yeah, well, I'm washing myself out now. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop taking questions and we're going to go to another break. So thank you. We'll give the interpreters a chance to switch out as well. So see you all back here in just a few minutes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, hello.
Hello there. Oh, okay.
Hey.
Hello, hello.
So we're going to go ahead and go back live now. And at this time, David, you can turn your camera off if you'd like, mute. And I'm going to point out Alex. Hi, Alex.
Oh, hello, hello.
Set up our interpreter there as well. Alex is going to go ahead and present. So we're going to go ahead and just go back live now. And Alex, you probably want to turn off your YouTube volume.
Cool. Yeah, no, it should be all off. So yeah, there's nothing YouTube coming through for me.
Yeah, that's me.
So, yeah,
Sorry.
cool. No worries. Cool. Am I all good? Is it? Should I begin?
Yeah. At this time, yeah, let's go ahead and have Alex take over, and I'm going to go ahead and disappear from your screen.
Cool. Wonderful. Sweet. Okay. Yeah. Hi guys. Yeah. Welcome to my final project dissertation talk. It's yeah. It's quite the surreal experience finally getting here. I know everyone's had an interesting lockdown, to say the least. So yeah, thank you for tuning into the show. It means a lot to all of us. We've all put in a lot of hard effort getting to this point. So yeah, without further ado, I'll begin. So yeah, my final project was the idea of a game or a game show called Tear Down Your Idols, which kind of begun from my interest in revisionism and politics, and how prevalent that was kind of starting to become, especially with the recent kind of events in the UK, with the Edward Colston statue being pulled down in Bristol. And so it kind of sprung up this idea, which, you know, is brought up time and time again of, you know, is it possible to separate historical figures from you know, the awful acts they've committed from their legacies, and, you know, the way in which politicians and we as a community tend to kind of deify these figures. Yeah, and it also came from my undergraduate degree in philosophy and the kind of ethics at hand of yeah, analyzing leaders or historical figures. So yeah, the kind of early brainstorming process was, you know, I just wanted to work out what I was going to base it on from games I'd played as well, things I've read, and I ended up finding this brilliant journal by a lecturer up in Newcastle who's also worked on games, called Bakuchi, and he was really looking at kind of like politics and within video game narratives and their connection to linearity. You know, what kind of different presentations of politics can happen when, you know, user interactivity is also at hand, which is, you know, what makes games so special and what makes it so different from any other kind of digital media format. So yeah, as you can see the few images on the screen, I was looking at everything on the scale from Kentucky Route Zero in the bottom, which was one of the biggest inspirations for my project, and then kind of like environmentalism in Red Dead Redemption 2 and class structures in Vampire. So yeah, I started prototyping the game. You know, I was trying to establish themes and motifs, what I was trying to go for, how I wanted to present these historical figures and their backgrounds, and, you know, how they would be presented to the user in a way that was not overbearing too much, but I still wanted all the information to be, you know, completely historically accurate. You know, without that, there would be no weight to the game and to what the player is getting to experience. So yeah, I came up with this idea of this kind of like game show feel almost, in which, you know, there would be this kind of like level of interactivity still, and at one point I was even going to use kind of like game show like sound effects on like, you know, correct and wrong answers and stuff. But I ended up just kind of steering away from that and trying to just use it, yeah, not too heavily. And yeah, this was kind of the main question of which then put me into my dissertation, which you can see on the screen now, and it was kind of, you know, the consequences of capitalism in political settings and how video games decide to explore that, you know, both overtly and covertly, and also because there's been such discussion in the discourse surrounding video games about the inclusion of politics, and how, you know, that can either like deter the user experience, and like what do people who play these games and spend, you know, an awful lot of money on, what do they want out of their games as well. So yeah, leads me on to my first narrative case study, which was Kentucky Route Zero. And I think the biggest lesson from playing Kentucky Route Zero and finally being finished this year was, you know, on an indie scale, these discussions can really be explored, and there's no publishers attached, or, you know, consumer groups who are giving input on, oh, you know, we don't enjoy this, we don't enjoy X. And that kind of creative freedom really kind of resonated with me, and was one of, you know, the main reasons why I decided to start this master's even at Goldsmiths. So yeah, I started researching, started reading a lot of stuff, and ended up finding, that linearity was a massive principle of interaction. And as the games became more open world and less linear in terms of choices, that the discussion of politics became more of a side factor, or it was kind of sadly reduced to you know, the background or the environment, as opposed to being like the actual crux of the narrative and what the events revolved around. Yeah, and the engagement and disengagement kind of came hand in hand with that as well. And, you know, a lot of people seem to kind of like very much appreciate what Kentucky Route Zero is trying to say, and its portrayal of capitalism in the United States, and then in contrast with something like Red Dead and talking about like environmentalism, it was very much left to the user to kind of work that out. There was small discussions of it from the characters in the narrative, but it wasn't it wasn't the sole purpose of discussion. So yeah, and that once again had a big impact on my game development kind of theory. You know, would people react to these historical events? Would people feel like they were learning a lot from the game? And even, you know, in a short kind of narrative space, would the motif of the game, or, you know, what I wanted people to come away from was just having felt like they'd learned something new, and that, you know, these 15-20 minutes of playing hadn't been a waste of time, or they felt like they were being lectured, or, you know, just told what to think, because, you know, that was, yeah, is what these historical figures tried to do to most people. So yeah, I kind of, you know, had everything worked out, and went into the development phase of the game with kind of 3 vital steps that I wanted to make sure, and especially talking to Fede, who's our brilliant head lecturer of our course. His feedback was really vital in just kind of discerning what direction I wanted the game to go. So yeah, step 1 was historical information. Yeah, just complete rigorous fact checking to make sure all information given to the player was accurate, had been double checked, quotations, just information, trying to get both sides of you know, the legacy of these characters. And as you can see, Mother Teresa was one of the early ones that, when researching, there was quite a skewed view on what the general perception of this saint was, and you can explore it more in the game. The second objective was establishing player choice. So it was giving the player the control of this revisionism. You know, how do we face up to these acts? What do we include in? What information do we include to the public? What is given? And once again, like even with Kentucky Route Zero, there is even if you have a linear game, you can have an element of choice, and that choice still be personal to the user without it being broadcasted. You know, have you made a right choice? Have you made a wrong choice? It was more about just getting the player to think about these things and just to kind of mull it over and to not just immediately kind of hit one button or the other. And the third principle was narrative flavor. So it was how to make sure that, you know, in reality, these are really awful acts that these historical figures have committed. And I think that's very hard to get away from, especially, you know, for us, well, being in the UK, we were always kind of taught in our history lessons that, you know, and I'm sure a lot of people from the UK, if you spoke to your parents and you talk about Winston Churchill, you may think that, you know, oh, he was this shining light of the UK, and you know, even in the game, you find, you know, he was voted the greatest Briton to have ever existed a few years ago when the survey was given out, and stuff like that, and then finding out what this man was actually capable of and what he let happen was quite a shock. And so yeah, after that was it. It all culminated in the final page that's now up and running. I'll put a link to the web page. I'm still taking user feedback as well, which is a really great step as well. And yeah, just to kind of get close to finish off, finally started getting back early user testing results, and I feel like this is definitely the most interesting part of making something and getting user feedback for the first time. So yeah, it seemed early on, like it seems to be the case that people have really learned a lot from the game, and I can definitely say that it's achieved that aim of mine. And that's also then attached to, you know, people's perspectives changing. Most of the people who have played this have felt like that their perspective on these figures has changed. They've learned something new, you know, and they've reassessed their kind of their belief or how they look up to people, or, you know, or why we as a community choose to, you know, glorify these individuals. Another important finding was that people actually really didn't mind having politics at the core center of the game. You know, I always wanted to be very kind of upfront about what the game was. I didn't want it to be kind of, you know, tied in as a side plan of, you know, oh, you're going to play this little game show, and then be like slapped around the face with politics and just like be completely, you know, surprised by the subject matter of the game. And then the only kind of one, the only thought so far, and something that I definitely would have changed, what I think would have been the interactive element. Although I was really happy with kind of having just something so simple as a kind of an include or reject, and having, you know, that bring up questions to the player about whether they enjoyed, you know, struggling to decide what they wanted to include or not. A lot of people actually didn't find it that difficult to decide what they wanted to include, and maybe that's something that will change as user testing kind of expands and all the data starts kind of being collated. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to work on this, and yeah, thank you to everyone at Goldsmiths Computing as well.
Awesome, thank you for that presentation.
Right.
We have had some questions coming through already. So you put in there that you did a lot of research before you started designing the game. So how much time did you spend approximately in the research and planning phase?
I think it was, I haven't until this point made a game about you know, doing something like this that was very like based in history. So it kind of really changed my approach to how I was going to make the game. And so it took me, yeah, a good few weeks of just double checking everything, making sure that I wanted to kind of establish a reoccurring kind of like aesthetic for the game, and that this information was seen from both sides and not, you know, biased to kind of demonization, but was just a statement of facts and what these people had done. Yeah, so yeah, a good few weeks for something this kind of historically based.
So from the you were kind of heading towards there, and I kind of thought I'd just ask, from the feedback that you got, did you find that anyone found it more, like, I guess, kind of changed their answer to whether to accept or reject these characters based on the information you gave them?
I think for me, I think it was just a case of I think finding the right language. I think that was something I struggled with throughout the development, was finding the correct terminology to use, or the correct flavor of text to kind of have, you know, a narrator who, and because it was so difficult trying to, you know, the first projects I made were all had voice acting as well, which I've always really enjoyed in terms of like short narrative games, and I, as soon as kind of lockdown hit, it was, oh, okay, well, trying to organize a kind of a professional enough setting for voice acting to be recorded, you know, to be edited, and especially when you're trying to do all of that by yourself, it can be quite a challenge, and trying to do that digitally was just never going to be up to the quality that would have been, I don't know, kind of good enough. And then even finding the correct person to kind of balance the tone of the game and the kind of the historical information would have been quite difficult.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that in game dev you could change in retrospect.
Yes, yes, it's just about getting, yeah, it's about getting months into development, and then, yeah, being worried you might have to go back and completely overhaul a section, or, yeah, it can be quite intimidating.
So yeah, looking back on the game, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I think once again, you know, if trying to, like, if I could have imagined a 3D space in which this would have worked, or, you know, it was just about and I've really enjoyed, as someone who very much focuses on the narrative side of games, and enjoys doing a lot of game writing. Yeah, I think translating that into kind of, you know, a 3D space where interaction can happen as well is a completely, you know, daunting challenge at this point. But hopefully with everything from Goldsmiths and learning everything, hopefully it's something that can be developed on. the ideas are there. It's just the having the capability to pull off something like that is still quite daunting, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth pointing out that the short amount of time that we have to make games on the course is that these are going to be more concepts of ideas rather than a finished product.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I feel like that's in and of itself, like it shouldn't subtract from what you want to make, and I think it shouldn't alter what you want to make as well. I think as long as you're out there, and I think Fede said this, you know, in an opening statement or a speech, you know, like everyone should give it a go and give it a hand at making games, because you know there's so many different points of view that are yet to be explored, and so many ideas that are, you know, there to be expressed. So yeah.
So I'll make this the last question.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's good because it's a long one.
Oh,
it's made up of 3 questions.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
A trio.
A trio, yes.
Mm.
Do you think there should be in-game consequences for the player's choices? How might you approach that? Or do you think that might be too heavy-handed?
I think it brings it back to kind of what Kentucky Route Zero does, and that's keeping these decisions away from the user, or not presenting them in sheer just kind of like numbers, or, you know, so and so pick this, or, you know, you are wrong to make this choice. Kind of actually devalues the thought process that the user should be having when playing the game. You know, I feel like that's even more powerful than having a simple kind of scoreboard or a kind of reoccurring kind of, you know, reminder of if you're doing well, or, you know, there is so much we can do with our imaginations and thinking about stuff. And when you play something that is really you know, of that quality, that it pours out of the game and makes you question things, you know, in your own life, then I think then like a developer has like really succeeded.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
I will let Russ come back in and take over before I derail too much.
No worries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, Alex. Great presentation.
Cheers, man.
You did really well. At this time, I'm going to say so long to Alex. You can exit back to the breakout room, and going to let everybody know we're going to take about a 10-minute break to give our interpreters a chance to rest their hands, and also prepare for Jade Hall-Smith. She is in the breakout room waiting, but we got a little ahead of ourselves. So just give us a few minutes to get caught back up, and we'll be back shortly. So see you in a little while. Hello, everyone. We are back and ready to pick up with our next presenter. We have Jade Hall-Smith, who I believe is going to be giving us a bit of information about how to develop and design for accessibility. And this is a topic that we're seeing a lot of in game development and in other circles. So I'm looking forward to your talk, Jade, and I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and get out of the way so that you can take over. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much. Right, okay, let me just share my screen. Desktop 2. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen there. Hi everybody. I'm going to be talking about games accessibility and how to make games fun and enjoyable for everyone. Granted, I'd like to talk in a lot of detail, but given the time restraints, of course, I'm going to do as much as I can, and you can ask me any questions later on. And of course, you have access to the slides if you need it as well, so you can look at them and talk to me about anything later on. So hello, my name is Jade. I am a former Goldsmiths grad. I graduated in 2018. I also have a few disabilities myself. So I have autism, dyspraxic, and I also have anxiety, as well as a few mobility impairments. I'm passionate about disability and advocacy, and I've basically been doing that since I was in Goldsmiths, actually, maybe a little bit before that. So previously, I've done accessibility inclusion at Goldsmiths as one of the computing reps. I've also been a disabled students officer. I've worked as a one-to-one with children with autism, and currently I'm doing support work for adults with learning disabilities. I'm an Autistica Play rep. Autistica is an organisation that supports autistic people and their families, and they've recently started a breakout where they support autistic people in the gaming industry and autistic gamers. So I'm a representative and an ambassador for them. So sometimes I do consultancy as part of the Autistica Play rep, but I also do that in my spare time anyways. So I'm going to start off by talking about games that have done it right. And when I say done it right, I mean they've looked at accessibility, they've started the grassroots, and they've talked to disabled people, and therefore their games have been very accessible to people with disabilities, and they're able to play that without feeling that they're excluded from the gaming world as players. So I'll start with Mortal Kombat. I don't personally play the game myself. My brother loves it. My brother also has autism. Mortal Kombat, I know, has a lot of accessibility features. They have a system where they're able to put the audio from one end to the other. So say if you're blind or visually impaired, you can hear when your character is on the left of the screen or an attack is coming from the right of the screen, or vice versa. So they've got audio surround. They have audio cues as well for people who are visually impaired. They have some things for people with motor disabilities. They also have color blind options and stuff like that. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was very interesting because I actually went to Games Conference, Games Accessibility Conference. I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail later on. But Games Accessibility Conference were announcing at the time Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and they were talking about how they've adapted Lara Croft games for people with disabilities to be able to play. So they've made it so, for instance, some of the puzzles could be hard, but the combat itself could be easy, or you could have easy combat but harder puzzles. So it's fully customizable in that sense. And as you can see from the screenshot, which I'll talk over as well, there's subtitles, there's voice and language adjustments, there's music volume, dialogue volume, closed captioning, dynamic range, and that's just a few of those things that they include there. This is the game that I recently completed, which I found was so accessible and very, very fun to play. It had so many great accessibility features, including having the aim assist on and slow motion, so that if you have, for instance, I have problems with processing, and sometimes I struggle with my fine motor skills, so that means like using your analog stick and everything. So you were able to have more time to aim in the game or walk around. It had text to speak, it has screen magnifier, it has colorblind options. So there's a lot of things that you can adapt in there, audio, visual, motor, and you can adapt that fully to your needs. And it also has presets for people with audio, visual, or other impairments. And lastly, Gears of War 5. I'm not a massive Gears fan, but again, this was a game that I was able to play, and I have a gamer friend who actually does a lot of streaming, who's fully visually impaired, so he's legally blind, and he was able to play this game and complete it from start to finish. And he said that he really enjoyed the accessibility features on here because it allowed him to be part of the game. So it has audio, it has visual, text to speech, speech to text, vibration, subtitle sizing, subtitle color, etc., stuff like that. It was really, really great in accessibility. So what can we use games for? So there's many reasons why you can use games, and for many people they might actually just say, well, I just do it to, you know, have fun. But it's more than that. I mean, there's so many ways you can play games. You can use it for therapy and rehabilitation. You can use it for learning and developing for children. You can use it for socializing and having fun, stress relief, mental and health and disability awareness as a narrative to explain how you're feeling about something. You can have it as a social justice awareness. So there's many, many ways you can use games for your needs or the needs of others. Therapy and rehabilitation, for instance, on my dissertation, I was looking into games for narrative and disability awareness, but I was also looking at games that can help with therapy. So there was a game called Snow Worlds, which is a VR game, and that is a game that they use for patients who have been burnt and are having treatment at hospital for bodily burns and treatment to help with that. So this was a game that helped to take their mind off things, and it helped them to get better in a way, not just physically, but mentally as well. And of course, if we all know what's going on with COVID now, and a lot of children are having to be at home and learn. So you can use it for learning. You could use it as an adult for learning even. There's many ways you can use games, especially narrative games are a brilliant way of saying how you feel about something, or using it as a tool to really get a message across to people. So these are just a few. This is Dysphoria in the top left corner by Anna Anthropy. She made a game about going through transition. And my game on the top right corner, which is a game about mental health. It's based on my own experience with depression and anxiety, but also the experiences of other people. I also additionally made another game called Natural Tone, which was my final project. And that was about my experience of being autistic and also being intersectional, because I'm not just autistic, I'm a Black woman who with autism. So I made a game about a narrative game. It's about a game to raise awareness and how it is for me. The bottom right is Their Mother. That's a game about coming out to your mother and how the person who made it felt. And lastly, we have privilege in the bottom left corner, which is about racial privilege. So to the main point, how to make your games accessible. So there's many ways, and I might not cover it entirely from the duration of this slide, but firstly, I would say diversify your focus groups and tester sessions, especially if you're going to be making a game that is supposed to be for everybody. If you really want to get a message across, if you're making a narrative game and you want to get a message across, of course it has to get to as many people as possible. So diversify your focus groups. I don't just mean just like people who play games and people who don't play games. I'm talking about different age ranges, different gaming abilities, different races, different genders, different kinds of people in general. Like, you don't want to just, you know, test it with your friends or your family because they could be biased. You want to test it with strangers as well, get their honest opinion. Also ask disabled people, because including them in the process and the development of the game makes all the difference. It really does make a difference when it comes to making sure that your game is accessible to different disabilities. And one thing that I have learned is, as a developer, was that even if I'm disabled myself, there's so many things that I can do with ease that my friends who also have disabilities, or the same or different disabilities, might not be able to do. So don't just think, oh, well, if it's accessible for me, it's accessible for everybody, because that's never the case. You always need to ask many people, different types of people, to play your games as much as possible. And after that, keep on testing it, make sure it works, make sure there's no bugs in it, make sure that if someone has said, oh, I can't use the mouse scroller because I have problems with, for instance, my fine motor skills or moving my hands around, you know, think of a new way. Can I make this different? Can I make this more accessible? Can I change something? You know, just keep listening, testing, networking and game conventions. Now, the one that I would say, which is brilliant, especially if you want to get into accessible gaming, is GA Conference. I've provided the link there. They are specifically for gamers with accessibility, or gaming developers who want to make accessible games. So GA stands for Games Accessibility, and obviously conference is conference. So if you want to attend that, there's one that's happening September, and that's free. It's online. It's usually an event that you go to in person, but this one's free. And if you look on the website, they'll let you join up with that one. International Game Developers Association Special Game Accessibility Interest Group. Sorry, I didn't want to just put the acronym. I wanted to say what it was. That again, it's a one that's specifically for disabled gamers and making games more accessible. Games Accessibility Guidelines is a brilliant resource that you can go online, and they will tell you what sizing your subtitles need to be, or how your audio needs to be, or for instance, what are the best things for different disabilities. It has a full list, but it also has lists that you can go on, for instance, audio or visual or whatever. So it has set lists, and it has a full list of things as well. Don't be afraid to ask for forums for if you have any technical problems. I mean, I know when I first started on the course, I was very new to gaming. As I'm a gamer, but I didn't know how to make games. It's always useful to ask people for technical advice. They might even have ideas on how to make your games accessible. Check to see if your software has accessibility plugins or extensions. I know Unity has a bunch. I know GameMaker has some, but I'm not entirely sure how many. And there's probably more software out there that does accessibility plugins too. So keep staying curious, and keep trying to find as many things as possible to help you with your journey. And again, keep testing and asking. So lastly, or second to last, it's a journey. So don't always think, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that. You have to keep evolving, and it's something that you need to just keep getting better at. Sometimes you're going to make a game that might not be that great. Never mind, just get back on the horse and try making it a bit more accessible, enjoyable, whatever the game. I'm sure that it's just one little thing in your portfolio. I mean, you're going to keep getting better at it, and just stay curious, start small. Don't always have a big project that you think, oh, I'm going to make all these accessibility features, because the truth is, unfortunately, there's never going to be something as a small game developer you can do entirely by yourself that's accessible for everybody. But as long as you keep trying and progressing, it's always going to get better, and people will appreciate you making the effort to make sure that they can play your games. So keep trying your best and keep small, and keep developing that, and of course learn from your mistakes and keep learning. So I'm going to end it with a quote, and then we can do the Q&As and whatnot. So this is the quote directly from one of my friends that I met at the Games Accessibility Conference. So, as an accessibility consultant and gamer without sight, accessibility in games not only matters because it's my job, but also because gaming is an integral part of popular culture and social interaction, that being left out of those great franchises, Halo, God of War, Zelda, to name just 3, is really frustrating. The more people that can join in with these amazing immersive experience, the less those players feel isolated or out of the loop, and the more they can engage just like everyone else around them on the same level, pun intended. As Microsoft's Super Bowl ad puts it, when everybody plays, we all win. And to supplement that, if you don't intentionally include, you unintentionally exclude. So thank you for listening, and I hope that gave you a bit of insight about how to make your games accessible.
Hi, Jade.
Hi.
Wow, that was a really great presentation.
Thank you.
For that. I've not been following in the chat so much. We've got people who are monitoring that. So I'm gonna see if we have any questions. Martha, did you see any questions there?
No questions yet. I have one, if that's all right for me to ask.
Of course.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I was just curious, what was, in your experience, one thing in terms of accessibility that developers tend to overlook?
Good question. Well, I think that subtitles is a common thing that everyone just thinks, oh, well, my game has subtitles and therefore it's accessible. But that's not as great if you have someone who has motor impairments, etc. So alternate keyboard controls is great. But it's difficult because I know that in the past I've probably created games myself that hasn't been entirely accessible for everyone. Like I said, I've got many disabled friends, and some of them are like, I'm not sure if I can play this game. But it's always about staying curious and making sure that you have the insight to think, okay, how can I make this more accessible? How can I try my best to do it for them? And you know, there's so many resources out there online and for free that people can go on there and just find out, you know, what can I do to make my game accessible. And like I said, plugins are so easy to add to your games these days that like it will help you with not only subtitles but alternate controls. There's a brilliant plugin for Game Maker. I've not used it myself, but I've heard it's very good. And you just literally put it in your game and it has the color blindness option. So it gives you loads of different filters for color blindness. And yeah, so sorry, that's a very long answer, but hopefully that answers the question a little bit at least.
It does. We've had another question, which is, do you think the indie space or AAA is further ahead with creating great accessibility options?
Good question, because I've got like I play lots of games myself, and I've basically been comparing the games that I've got a PS3 and I've got PS4 and Xbox One, and I've been comparing older games and even some modern games that are like AAA, for instance, that have failed completely in accessibility. Like I've been struggling to play it, and my motor skills aren't as poor as some other people's that I know, and I've been struggling to play it. So I've been thinking, how do other people play this game? But there's been like a lot of advancements in AAA games. Like I said, The Last of Us was brilliant. It had so many presets and adjustabilities. But then there's also some great indie games that do that as well. So I would say at the moment it's a bit of a tie with AAA going a little bit further, only because they've got more money to do so. And I went to a games convention. I can't remember what it's called, but I went to one of those. I've been to so many, and basically they had like a one that's just so dedicated to games accessibility, and Xbox and EA have really been trying to push for more accessibility in their studios, and you know, who they employ, like diverse people. So it's been a bit of a mixture, in my opinion, but AAA have more resources to do it, unfortunately. So I think that they're a bit more further ahead.
Okay, I'll give people another moment to
Yeah,
get
that's fine.
questions in if they have any. There's a delay on the YouTube.
No worries.
Actually, while we wait and let other people ask questions, I have one myself.
Yeah, sure.
Particularly with Unity, because that's what I use and a lot of us are using. Are there any assets that you're aware of that would make, you know, accessibility easier for us as indie devs?
So one thing I forgot to say about Unity, like I said, I can't really cover the breadth of what I want to say, but I've got a few things to add about Unity. Unity is a great software. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's very powerful. However, I always found that it was very inaccessible for me, so I don't personally use it myself. I'm definitely a visual person. Like, I learn way better when I have visuals. I know that Unity have so many plugins and assets and stuff that you can use, and I always tell people about that because I know friends who have used accessibility features in Unity. But for me, I prefer to use Game Maker just because it's visual, and you can like put things in, like, not just metaphorical boxes. You can actually put things in boxes. Like, things are a lot more organized in there. I can put things in folders and stuff like that. And anyway, the basic point that I'm trying to say is that Unity has got a lot of resources, definitely. It has one that I was looking at before, which was a it's the UI plugin, and it's paid one, unfortunately. However, it comes with a lot of stuff. It has a voiceover. It has stuff for like text to speech, I believe. So it has got a lot of stuff that will help with accessibility features, which I always recommend people, if they really want to do accessibility and they do have the money for it, to try and, you know, push for getting plugins that will support people or players with disabilities to be able to play the games that people are making.
Well, Martha, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Jade, is there anything else you want to address at this point, or?
Oh, no. more than happy to let you guys get along with your awesome show.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate your imparting knowledge. At this time, we're going to take 5 minutes and get set up for David, who will be our next speaker. So thank you, Jade. You're free to go back to the breakout room and hang out and chat with the students there, or go on about the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
to
you.
our viewers, like I said, 5 minutes, and we'll be back here at the top of the hour.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Hi, everyone. Our 5-minute break is over. I'm going to go ahead and switch our interpreter over to Akbar. And we're going to get started here in just a moment. Let's see here. So at this time, we're going to have David pop into view. Hi, David. And David is going to be our next student presenter. And so I'm going to disappear and let David take over. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I'll just quickly finish setting up. Right, all good. So I'm going to talk a bit about my game project and a bit about my thesis as well. The game is called This Is How It Is, and so I decided to name this talk This Is How It Is, or How Humorous Computer Game Design Can Build Upon Previous Forms of Political Satire. I will get into that a little bit more in just a sec. I will try to say some of my stuff shortly, slowly, just for the sake of the interpreter, because I'm going to be using some big words and some probably complex themes. So just to give a bit of background, hi, I'm David. And so my background before coming to Goldsmiths was actually more in the programming side of games, but I quickly found that I was very much more passionate about the design and the writing of games. I've had writing as a hobby for a while, but it was within the last few years I started getting into writing comedy. Comedy is very much a lot of trial and error, and I've had plenty of times to fail at being funny before I knew how to actually write something that could make someone laugh. And in the last year, I recently started doing stand-up comedy. I actually started around December time, which suspiciously is the time that coronavirus came about. So I'm not sure whether I've unleashed some kind of horrible curse on this world. But most of my life, I've been a fan of satire. I've watched a lot of satirical TV programs, a lot of satirical films. I've been reading quite a few satire books lately, and it's always been something that I've wanted to attempt myself. So I decided to do it in a game. I took inspirations from other forms of mediums like films. Dr. Strangelove and Sorry to Bother You were two big inspirations. Of course, Dr. Strangelove being a satire of Cold War politics at the time, and Sorry to Bother You being like a satirical critique of capitalism, especially personas that we have to adopt in order to achieve a higher level, ironically, in our satirical system, in our capitalist system even. Getting my words mixed up. I also took some inspiration from games. Everything's Going to Be Okay was definitely a game that showed me just like a new way of looking at comedy in games. It's actually comedy being used to convey some very dark themes as well, like especially if you know what the developer was going through at the time that they made this game. And it was kind of looking at how you could communicate some very serious topics but still make it quite humorous. And And Mola Industria as well, as a developer, focuses a lot on satire. The screenshot I used there was from a game called Phone Story, which follows the process of making a phone, and it kind of almost hijacks the personality or the persona of the phone or the phone manufacturer to communicate this message about how corrupt and how immoral the process of making a phone actually is. And I took inspirations from literature as well, like Brave New World, and I read a book called Only a Joke Can Save Us, which was very good at explaining the theories of comedy. The difficult part was trying to transfer that over to game design, but yes, that will come later. So as I stated earlier, we the game tackles some very big societal themes. One of which is the relationship between politics and capitalism. There's quite a bit of literature out there which talks about how policy decisions influence the economy, and how the economy also influences politics and decisions that politicians make. I also tackle the discourse between socialism and conservatism, because I can't say for certain how big this topic has been for how long, but at the moment we're kind of seeing more clashes between opposing viewpoints. We're living in a very turbulent time politically, and socialism and conservatism is probably some of two of the biggest ideologies at the moment. I'm sure someone will correct me about that later, but for me personally, that's just the two that I feel really contradict each other the most. And of course, I wanted to talk about the unequal democracy of first past the post election systems, which is a electoral system that we have in the UK, and I really feel personally is unfair, as do a lot of other people. At the moment, our current Conservative government holds the majority of seats in the House of Parliament, despite only having 41% of the actual supporting votes. So at some point you have to look at that, and I think since 1935, 90% of governments have been controlled by one majority party, and in each of those cases there has not been a single time that they've had a majority of the votes. So they have minority of the votes but majority of the seats, and you have to look at that and think that something's not quite right there. Something you're not getting proper political representation. And of course, we have a little cartoon to demonstrate capitalism. I've definitely discovered this. I wish I could have used this in my game, but oh well. I still leave it there because it's very I like the cartoon. So there were some problems for me to tackle from a design and development point of view. I realized I should probably move the camera down so you can actually see me. Hello. First of all, like I mentioned before, was actually comedy in games. Comedy is very much all about comedy works if you have a good structure to it. But when you hand over control to a player, the structure can be skewed. Players sometimes don't follow the structure. It's very difficult to do comedy well in games, which is probably why we don't get a lot of game developers actually attempt it. Another problem is actually trying to present political themes in games. Of course, the good old topic of get your politics out of my game. It's very difficult to get a lot of gamers to open up and listen to quite overt political topics without them getting quite reactionary and quite defensive, especially if the politics is something that they don't necessarily agree with. Another thing I wanted to do with satire in games is to actually try to inspire change, not necessarily actually promote propaganda. There's a fine line to walk between satire and propaganda. Absolutely in no way do I want to brainwash anyone, but I think it's good if political satire can actually inspire people to speak up, to actually act on the politics they are passionate about. And one of the big things was actually bringing something new to political satire. Can games actually provide something that film, television, books, theatre, is there something that games can do that all of those other forms of arts are not capable of doing at this moment? Oh, and as I mentioned, don't make propaganda. And so I decided to doing my research, I found some design tools which really helped. For example, using abstraction and association. I also structured my game around a sequence of arcs. I also catered a lot of the game design to a concept called abusive game design, which sounds bad, but I promise you it's not as bad as it sounds. I will elaborate on all of these as I go along. So abstraction and association. So a lot of this is about, you can think of this as like having metaphors in the game. So for example, all of the characters were animals, and this very much helped with actually, you can draw animal-like behaviors and then assign them to human-like behaviors, and that really helps players to kind of draw these links together. I remember I had one playtester who saw a party of politicians that were all made up of pigs and vultures, and was immediately like, I don't trust them. A gamified political systems, as I mentioned before about the relationship between politics and capitalism. I was inspired by Mola Industria's talk on video games and the spirit of capitalism, how a lot of game systems can mimic elements of capitalism, and that very much inspired me to then take like elements of game design that mimic capitalism and find connections that I can make to elements of politics that are linked to capitalism, and that very much managed to help build up that association inside the player's mind. I realize now that I should probably read my notes before I make points. I also have the whole game story is set on this island, which is floating and it's been fragmented, and it's meant to symbolize how divided the countries can become by politics. There's an image of it there. That's an earlier version of the island. It's definitely been a lot more populated than that now by houses and trees to kind of make it feel more alive. But from like an early stage in development, I definitely pictured this image of an island that was split apart and divided. And I structured my game, like I said earlier, around something called sequence of arcs. So throughout the game, the gameplay would shift. So you would play putting shapes in the holes in one section, and then later on, you then move on to help a character out with their photo opportunities. So you then have to take photos and help them usher away people who won't stop talking to them. And another time you have to gather up some people for a politician's march. So there was a lot of times where it changed, and that actually provided some opportunities to implement comedy into the game design, because players, while they're playing a game, build up like a mental model of how they perceive the game to work. And a great way to create comedy is to subvert what the audience is expecting. This is called incongruity. I'm gonna give the interpreter some time to. No, you got that. Great. Incongruity. Good. So the sequence of arc structure allowed me as a designer to always be subverting the player's expectations by constantly providing like a new game element, a new task, a new type of interaction, a new way to interact with the world, and players like would laugh from the fact that they were not expecting to happen what happens to happen. They were always kept on their toes in a way. Another thing as well is that to build off what I was saying about the mental model, is that I found in my research that humor actually helps to retain information. So there were times where a player might struggle to learn a specific mechanic, but when they do, because the mechanic was humorous, they remembered it, which was great. Also, arcs are just similar to jokes. So if we see here, we have the model and the actions almost serving as the setup, and then the rules and the feedback serving as the payoff for each of the jokes. And I just realized I really need to move on. So abusive game design, so there are different types of abusive game design. We have aesthetic abuse, which is the colors, or sort of like just any way that you can kind of really sort of like throw a lot at the player aesthetically. Lying to the player, which I did quite a bit. So there are a lot of dialogue options that don't go anywhere. And of course, a lot of times where you are presented with a situation and then it turns out that that's not the outcome that they were expected. Unfair gameplay. I think having the gameplay always shifting meant that the players never actually had a full grasp of what was going on in the game. And the purpose of, politics as well. Putting politics in the game is like a way of bleeding the character into like the player's real life character in a way. That's talking about politics usually gets a lot of people motivated, and it definitely gets you to start talking about politics more. And abusive game design serves the purpose of just making you look at the game differently. You're not looking at it as a system to benefit your experience, your gameplay experiences. You're now seeing the gameplay experience as what is the message that the designer's intending here. Here's an example of the game. I can't remember what it's called, GURP or something. I think the game's called GURP, and it's a very difficult game. And at the end, the bird can win the game instead. So what did I find? I will go through these quickly. I'm sorry. So what I found was that sometimes a lot of people are rooted in their ideas, and the game does not influence their perspectives, but it does start discussions. It does motivate players to get talking more about politics, and actually gets them engaged as well, which one participant even mentioned that it could really be a good tool to use in educational settings, getting students to talk more about a topic that they would otherwise not be that interested in. Let's see if I can try and turn the light up. Nope, okay, never mind. And the great thing about it was that a majority of the people who played it considered it satire. So that's a good result in itself. Mistakes were made though. I'd say definitely a lot of people said that the narrative would have been a lot better if there were more perspectives to work with, so it was less biased, and it might even influence people more if you saw the other side of the story. I focused more on the campaign of one particular party, and it may even have helped the experience and helped the power to influence by showing the other side of the story. And unfortunately, not all games would be able to follow a sequence of arcs type structure. It's better for shorter experiences, and I found that you could probably design something better using loops and arcs instead. And that's it. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions. I'm sorry if that overrun at all, and I'm sorry that I was suddenly going really dark here.
So we've had a couple questions come in. The first one was, where did the idea to slap people away come from?
So yeah, I think this is definitely talking about in the game when you're taking photo opportunities of people, when they won't stop talking to the candidates that has their photos taken, you get to walk over and slap them out the way, and it sends them flying. And idea originally came out as you see a lot of politicians doing these photo opportunities, going on campaigns to talk about why they care so much about these people that they're seeing, and in the end they don't actually care about the people they are standing with. And I thought a good way of showing that was to show that as soon as the photos are taken, they're pretty much just brushed aside.
Another question was, since comedy is highly dependent on timing, how did you pace the presentation of humor?
So the actual story was very structured. I had like a very linear story that led through the whole experience, with moments to diverge from the story to explore these little gameplay elements. So having the narrative structure in there definitely helped, but also kind of found that through the process of the player discovering how the mechanics worked, actually provided its own timing as well. Because sometimes they may not realize that, for example, there's a shapes in the whole game at the beginning of the game, and you get presented with a square hole and a circle hole, and you keep putting squares in the square hole, circle in the circle hole. But then eventually you're given a triangle, and players then aren't sure what to do with the triangle, and they'll try different holes, and they'll realize at the end that there's a knife sitting at the end of the table that they have to cut the corners off the triangle, and the triangle suddenly starts screaming from the pain. And that was just sort of like the time it took for them to realize the solution actually almost provided its own build up. And it was, yeah, it's giving the players the control to build up the suspense and actually working for the payoff for the joke actually worked quite well.
And the last question that's come in so far is abusive gaming something you defined yourself, or is it a predefined research topic in game research?
I wish I could come up with game design concepts, but it's a predefined research topic. I have not seen many people talking about it personally, but it's definitely, I think, because of how subversive it is from the original ideas of game design. It very much, I don't think it's something that is talked about enough.
And I believe those are all of the questions that we have right now.
David, thank you very much for your presentation. You did go a little long, but I won't beat you up about it.
You're coming to kick me out now.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have other people. And so at this time, I'm going to say so long to David, and we're going to take 5 minutes. So yes, it's going to put us a little behind schedule, but I think that's more than reasonable. So we can change out our interpreters and get set up for our next presenter. So I'll see you in just a few minutes. Hi. Okay, we are back up and ready to get started with our next presenter. I'm going to ask Shantay to pop into the video and unmute. And hi, Shantay.
Hello.
And at this time, I'm just going to go ahead and mute and delete myself from view and let you begin your presentation.
I'm just going to share my screen quickly.
Yeah, no problem. Go right ahead.
Why can't I click on it? Okay, can you see that? All right. So hopefully you can all see this. So the theme that I decided to pursue for my work was serious games for serious change. And so this then in turn was what inspired my dissertation. So my dissertation focused on investigating how a digital game could create a social impact and a personal change in someone. And the way I wanted to explore this was I wanted to see if the story of a game developed empathy in the players, and if the fact that that story was about a real world topic had more of an impression on the players. So looking at this, my goal of the study was first to create a game in the direction of change. What I mean by that is to create a game that had a purpose other than just entertaining people. And second, it was to help grow the palette of games that are out right now. So I was trying to contribute to the kind of games for change movement in making something that was toward social impact. So this in turn resulted in the game that I made, which I titled Waiting. Now, Waiting started out as a point and click adventure, and what this did originally was it told the story of a family inside lockdown from their cat's perspective, which was quite an interesting perspective to take. And from the playtests, lots of players found it very enjoyable and even funny at times. But the problem was this wasn't the kind of emotions and response that I wanted to elicit from my players. So what happened next was I switched it up and I made it more of an environmental storytelling game, which means I kind of cut the text out and I focused on telling the story through the objects that were in the game. So this way players would piece the story together themselves instead of having it told to them. To give them a little bit more room for interpretation and also made them feel like a little bit more involved. So instead of just reading, they actually had an effect and they could like piece things together, which definitely made it a little bit more interesting, but ultimately again, still was missing the mark. So what I did was I took my idea back to the drawing board and I started to think, what do I need to do? So first thing I did was I eliminated any of the distractions. So things that I thought were taking away from my story, things that weren't making the story better or helping a player understand something. And one of these things was puzzles. I had way too many of these. They were too distracting and they wasn't adding depth to the story. So I cut most of these and decided to only keep core ones that gave the player enough interaction and actually connected to the story. Next thing was I focused on visual storytelling because, as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I figured instead of trying to tell my players all this information, I'm going to present them with these images, and then this will give them a chance to interpret the images how they think and piece the story together from their point of view, but also maintain the story that I want to tell. And finally, the last thing I wanted to do was my game was I'd say this, it was too much of a game. And I really wanted more people to be able to play it. I wanted people like my mum and my nan to be able to pick it up and play it, people who don't really play games. And to do that, what I needed to do was I needed to simplify the game down and make it more accessible to other people. So what I mean in that is I needed to make it less like you need to solve these puzzles and you need to do all these levels. And I just needed to like bring it back to just a piece of art almost that people can just interact with. So the result of this was the game turned into an interactive webcomic. And what this did was it made something that was easy to understand and easy to play, because what it meant was that all of the interactions in the game were either scrolling, dragging, or clicking, which is something that everyone does every day, all different ages. People use the phone, the computer, they're all used to this. So it was a very familiar and relatable interaction that everyone was going to be able to know. The next thing I did was I put very small, simple puzzles into the game. And what these were things like just something like a matching game, a simple drag and drop. And each of these would either add to a part of the comic panel that was already on the screen or help you progress to the next one. So what I was trying to do with this was I was trying to integrate the puzzles into the story, so that way they were absolutely necessary for the player. And the next thing I did was, again, like I said, was the visual storytelling. So originally when I started making the game, it had a very sketch-like feel, but from a lot of user feedback, I found this sometimes wasn't very clear to see or understand. So what I ended up doing was switching the game to flat illustrations, which are very minimalistic drawings with nice bold colors and really easy and clear to see. They're very common in icons, but what this did was it gave a nice clear picture for everyone to see and understand, and it was received a lot better. And then finally, what I added was very small interactions. And what these were just things like being able to move the comic panels around, being able to click certain aspects of the scene and change things. And what this was trying to do was it was trying to bring some more game elements into it while keeping it still like a comic, but adding some game elements. So it's trying to find a good balance between the two to make something that was both a game and a piece of art, but could double up as both. So this is some screenshots from the game here. So you can see the very flat, minimalistic art style that I portrayed, and the way that I tried to make everything just look like single kind of comic panel screens with very simple art. And another thing that I decided to do was the nice arrows were nice and bold, because originally what I had was very small arrows in the corner of the screen, but I noticed that a lot of people was missing these, and then they got really confused. So I kind of pushed these front and center of each of my scenes. That way people really knew where they was going in each scene. And from this, the result was, first of all, I had a story-driven game. So every aspect of the game contributed to the story. Everything was in line with the story, and the whole game was the story. There was nothing in there that didn't go with the story, which was exactly what I wanted. The next thing was it was open to interpretation. Because I didn't use words or I didn't use voice acting or anything like that, everything was just visual. It gave players a chance to put the story together the way they thought it was, but it also let them see my point of view because I had drawn all of the art. But then because there was no words, it gave them a chance to think what they thought the story was, which I thought was a really nice point, because it was really nice to hear from people how they had perceived the game and what they thought it was about. And a lot of the time, the baseline of the story was really getting across, and it was just small little things that were getting lost in translation. But I thought it was really nice that the main storyline was actually getting through to people. Next, it doubled up, like I said, as a game and a comic. So the way I did this was, it worked as a game because I had these interactions and these puzzles. But what I also did after playtesting it with some of the elderly groups was I made it so that each of the interactions or games was skippable. And the reason I did this was I didn't want players to get stuck and then start feeling frustrated and annoyed at the game, because it was meant to be a relaxing experience, just like reading a book or something like that. So I made it so they could skip any of these puzzles and just read the game almost like a comic book instead of like a game. So this way it appealed to more people. It wasn't like restricting in who it was targeted at. And this worked really well. So like I said, that worked really well for skipping the puzzles. So, and finally, this is out on itch.io. You can play it in your web browser, so you don't need to download it or anything like that. You can just play it straight up. So it'd be nice for anyone who feels like it, play it, and please let me know what you think. I'd love to know what you think the story was, and if you think it's actually having any effect on you, or if it's changed your view on anything, would be really great to know. And that concludes my talk. So I'd like to hear any questions anyone has, would be great.
Shantay.
Hello.
No questions on YouTube yet,
Got it.
but I'm curious about your just kind of development process of the images. I know you said you went from more sketchy to the
Yeah.
More flat, bold colors. I noticed a strong color palette. I'm very curious how you decided what sort of color palette to go with,
Yes.
and whether that had to do with what feelings you wanted to convey.
Yeah, it did actually. So originally I had a very pastel color palette, which at times almost started to feel a little bit too bland in the background sort of thing. So what I did, I kind of actually looked at I can't remember what it's called now. It's like this diagram, and it explains what sort of colors we relate to which type of emotions. And what I did was I looked at this and I sort of thought, what are the type of emotions that I want my players to feel or feels coming from the game? And from that, I selected the kind of the purples and the blues for the sort of like, the different moods that people would feel. Then I tried to brighten it up with some pinks and things like that. And it kind of just grew from there. I just started off with a series of colors that elicited the moods or feelings that I wanted the players to feel. And then from there, I just started to look at which colors would relate and go really well with each other. And then once I had done that, I restricted it down to just a few colors, because I always find if you're trying to tell a story or you want to make an impact, it's better to have a few colors that people can relate to, and it makes the story look really concise and it looks like it's all part of one thing instead of all these different images of all these colors that look like they're from different places. So I find it really helps to just bring the story together.
Cool. I'm going to leave it open to anyone else if they have any questions. Give people a minute because of the delay. We just had another question come in. It's, did lockdown affect the aesthetic of the game during development?
Yes, it did. So like I said, it actually originally started out as a series of sketches that I then kind of went in with Illustrator, and I was making them really detailed and really pretty. But then obviously lockdown hit and everything's got stressful, and I myself had to do a job and do some caring, and I just kind of was running out of time, but I didn't want to compromise the aesthetic of my game. So when I did some research into all these different art things and I found the flat illustrations and I saw that they were very minimalistic but they still looked really pretty, I was like, this is perfect. I can sit down, I can spend a couple hours a day, I can draw these really easy, they're still going to look really pretty, and they're still going to work really nicely with my game. So yeah, lockdown definitely pushed the art of my game in that direction, but I feel like it was a good direction in the end.
I think that's it for questions. Should we head to break before our next speaker?
Yeah, I was actually going to pop in just now to do that. So Shantay, thank you for your presentation. As I've seen in your past work, your ability to do programming and art for games is so impressive. So looking forward to seeing more work from you in the future personally. At this time, you can head back to the breakout room and hang out and chat some more. And we're going to take 5 minutes to get set up for our final presenter for the evening. And so just bear with us and we'll be back soon. Hello, everyone. Our final presenter is Jordy, and we're going to have a slightly different presentation here because Jordy does not speak and is deaf. And so you will hear one of the interpreters speaking for them. And then you'll also see Jordy signing. And so I'm actually going to take Charmaine out of the view for screen sharing. So when Jordy shares their screen, you'll still see Jordy signing, and you'll hear the interpreter. So we're gonna see if this works. So bear with me here.
Thank you.
All right, and so I'm going to disappear now and let you take over. So yay, you go.
Okay. Well, hello. Hello. Yeah, like Russ said, I'm Jordy. Yeah, just please bear with me because I'm super, super nervous. So I'm deaf, and my passion is about gaming accessibility. Okay, so, and that's basically the focus of my project. And I'll just go back a second, 1 second. Like I said, sorry, I'm very, very nervous. So I'm deaf, and my brother is deaf as well, and we both love playing games, but we found that sometimes it's quite difficult for us being deaf because some games have subtitles, and like Jade said earlier, a lot of games aren't accessible aside from the subtitles, but also for myself and my brother, our first language is British Sign Language. English isn't our first language, and so subtitles alone are not accessible for us. We need sign language access as well. So that's basically the focus of my project, looking at how we can provide accessibility through sign language. And I've been looking at a VR system in particular, which is Oculus Quest, this thing. And in Oculus Quest, they have a hand tracking system. I hadn't heard of it before, but when I did, I was like, no, absolutely, I've got to implement that into my games because possibly that hand tracking system could be used for British Sign Language. So I'm going to show you a video, which is very, very exciting. So just give you a little snapshot. Right, so these are they're the hands. So you can see I'm trying to do the BSL alphabet here, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. So, yeah, so I was thinking, how can I create a game based on this hand tracking system? How can I integrate BSL properly into the game so that the deaf community, the BSL community, can really engage with playing games? And I had to think about specifically the hand tracking. So not using a keypad or, you know, this thing. I think most of you are familiar with this thing. You can't use this thing with sign language. So rather than traditional devices like mouse and keyboard, how can we actually use the hand tracking system throughout the game? And recently I discovered something, a machine learning system called Interact ML. And the Interact ML is, it's basically a game machine. So I created this gaming machine, and with the Interact ML, it allows me to implement machine learning. So it's basically educating the game to recognize specific inputs. And in this particular case, it's sign language input. So I'm going to show you the video again, and this time we'll have a look at how I try to create a game with sign language in it. It's a very short video, it's just a demo, So yeah, I'll show you a kind of, short kind of section of it. But basically it's a scenario where the deaf player needs to create their own design for their own magic hat. So I'll show you that section. And this section is asking the player to choose the color and the size of the hat, basically. Yeah, so we'll have a look at that bit. Right, this is the start. So this is the start of the action. And you can see the signing there. So it's reading it and then signing it. So yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So it shows you, you know, how the hand tracking works with the sign language. And now you can see the choice of the different colors for the hat. So there's 3 choices of colors. So the machine learning recognizes the sign purple, and then you can see the hat changes color based on the input of the sign. And again, yellow, it's not very clear there, but you can sort of see the hands signing yellow. Okay, so you can see like how fantastic that works. And you can't always see the hand. Sometimes it's a bit blurred or it's not very clear. But basically that's how the hand tracking system works. It's how the hand tracking design works. It's not designed for sign language use. It's designed for kind of swiping movements or very basic gestures. It's not designed for the complexity of sign language. So for example, when the hands and the fingers kind of come across, like cross and interact with each other, it's not used to those kind of motions and those kind of gestures. So we have to be careful which signs we're teaching the machine. So that's why I chose those 3 primary colors, basically yellow, purple, yellow, gray, and purple. And you're probably thinking, why didn't choose the primary colors, red, green, red, blue, etc. And the reason for that is because the way that it's signed. So red is signed up on the lips, green is signed up on the arm, and so green, for example, as a sign, there's overlap involved with the hand on the arm, and the machine, the system doesn't work. It doesn't work with that kind of motion. So yeah, I had to be very careful choosing which signs fit, and that's why I chose yellow and purple in particular, because it was just simpler for the machine learning. Now I'm going to talk and explain a little bit more about the machine learning. The machine learning is very important, because without the machine learning, I wouldn't, have been able to do the input. It would have been so much work. I would have had to focus on every single part of the hand, every single, nook and cranny of the hand, the orientation, the hand shape, every single possibility that every single possible motion that you can do with your hand. It would have been just too much work. So what I did is I used Oculus Quest, and what I really wanted to use for this project was DTW, which stands for dynamic time warping. And that system was perfect for sign language because it's able to it's able to elicit the information from the start straight through to the end. So the whole motion from start to finish. So it's a perfect system that was really suitable. But unfortunately, the Interact ML is still in its very, very early stages of development. So it's not ready for professional release yet. So I decided to abandon that one. But the thing that I did use for this project was a classification program, which is basically a series of different images. So there's thousands and thousands of images that capture the movements of the hand, a little bit like animation. And then it shows kind of the hands, but it's not a fluid motion. It's kind of like lots and lots of pictures all shown in series. But then again, we have to be really careful about which signs we're showing. So for example, the level of detail involved in each of the signs. So purple, for example, the movement from the P to the specific hand gestures, specific hand movement of purple is really difficult to kind of get the machine learning to recognize. So in this particular case, we were able to change the color. We would be able to do something as simple as that. But the machine needs to be taught all these different signs and all these different rules. So, for example, the specificity of the P hand shape and that kind of thing. But there's a limit to the level of detail that we're able to go into. The third configuration that I would love to have used is and this helps us to work out the size from the start to the finish. So for example, you could have a range of colors. And I thought that was quite good for sign language as well, because it allows you a range. So for example, so the signs for small and big, the size of the space changes depending on the signing that you're using. So that's perfect for the design, because the motion, the level of motion and the size of the motion is also the meaning of the sign. So you can, depending on what motion you use, you can increase the size of the object, right? So I tried to do that, but it took a very, very long time to train the machine to do that. So I tried to use this thing, but didn't like it at all. It just refused to play, basically. And so I had to abandon that one as well. But out of everything that I tried, I thought, I think there is definitely potential there. There is definitely potential there. I think the technology is not quite there yet. Perhaps it's not the right time. But I think we definitely need to look at Interact ML and the motion tracking technology. And possibly in the future, there may be more potential for sign language use in games. So I think that's all from me. Are there any questions?
We do have some questions. So the first question is, what is the computer using to see your hands? A camera?
Yeah, so the Oculus Quest, so this thing, the Oculus Quest, that has its own kind of like, it's kind of like an internal, external tracking system, tracking monitor thing inside. So as you look through it, you can see the hands kind of virtually. I'm not that clued up in how it works exactly technically. I know how to use it, but I don't know how it works exactly. So yeah, I'm afraid I don't actually know. Sorry.
Okay, another question was, how would you like to see this system implemented in other games?
Well, one thought that I did have is when I first found out about InteractML, I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful for accessibility because it offers an opportunity. So say, for example, if you establish at the start of the game, the player can design their own input. It could be hands, it could be gestures, it could be particular motions or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be sign language. It could be like, a key band. You can change like a key band, something very simple, and a particular gesture to change, a particular object. So I just felt like, yeah, I just think it would be brilliant. I think it'd be brilliant. It was a brilliant way of providing accessibility to so many people to play games without needing specific technology for that disability, because this technology allows you to use your body, your face, your hands, whatever. And for a person like me who uses sign language, I can use sign language to access the game.
And someone wanted to know if there were any other games that use British Sign Language.
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. I'm aware that there are some VR educational programs. So those rely on 3D modeling and training for 3D modeling. And also, it's more animation though. It's more animation and kind of brushing up the 3D modeling. So it's more animation. It's not quite the same thing.
And there's another question. Do you think game developers and companies should consider providing small sign language videos in their games instead of just subtitles?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they should add the video plus the subtitles, because remember that deafness as a disability is so broad. There's so much diversity within just that category, from deaf people who use speech, who use writing, to deaf people who use sign language as their preferred method of communication. So it's got to be accessible for everybody.
We'll give people another moment, but that was the last question so far in the chat.
Wow, Jordy, such a cool application, and I was fascinated just watching your little video. Unfortunately, it did not show on YouTube very well. There was a lot of lag. So I would love for you to submit that video somehow online so people can see it. Just because it looked really cool from Zoom, but unfortunately viewers out in the YouTube sphere were not really able to follow along very well. Fascinating work. I took the machine learning class in spring and completely had trouble getting things to work. It just wasn't what I was trying to do. Didn't seem to fit. So congratulations on at least getting something to function. Because machine learning is still as difficult.
A lot. It was a lot of effort.
Yeah. So at this time, thank you for your presentation, and you're free to head back to the breakout room. And I'm going to high five in David, who is going to close us out for the evening. So thank you so much. And David, are you there?
I am here.
Okay. So Charmaine, are you going to stick around and interpret? Okay, I'm going to switch back to you as the highlight, just, and then I'm going to get out of here, and David's going to close us out. And then once David's done, we'll end the meeting for the day. So David, take it away.
Thank you. So yeah, I was tasked with closing out, providing a closing statement for the end of the show, or the end of today's show anyway. Don't forget, there is one on tomorrow as well, and we have more amazing stuff to show, and we have another guest speaker, and we also have our course leader having a fireside chat with like a second guest speaker as well, which is definitely something to look forward to. People told me that I can inject comedy into my closing statement. That's a lot of pressure, you know. Yes, I may do comedy, but it doesn't mean I am good at it. So one person actually asked me, they sent me a message saying, what did you do with the boxes? Because normally when I'm in this room, there's a lot of boxes behind me. There's actually, reveal a little bit, the boxes are behind a curtain all along. I thought that was going to fall on me then. Luckily it didn't. But yes, after I submitted my thesis and work, my partner gave me this t-shirt. It says, Class of 2020, the one where they were quarantined. I think that's a good way of leading into how the experience was this year. We just had to carry on working, making games while the whole world around us was burning. And if that doesn't get us a job, I don't know what will. I'm surprised none of us lost our minds, like Jack Nicholson from The Shining, putting some axes through some people's doors. But I told the police that I promised them it wouldn't happen again. So I wanted to say thank you to all of my peers who presented. So like Shani, Russ, Alex, Shantay, Jordy. There was also some other guy who did something on satire and some animals on an island. Like, probably ignore him. Like, probably won't have a career after this. It was also really interesting to see how everyone's work really reflected their personalities. Like, there was like people showing their creative side and like how passionate they were about their topics, and a lot of stuff about humanity and accessibility. It was really cool to see people really expressing themselves through their games. A lot of quite a bit of stuff about against capitalism. Hopefully it doesn't backfire when we go into the world to find a job. I'd also like to thank Jade if she is still listening. There was a great talk about accessibility. There are not enough games out there that are like really pushing for accessibility. Also want to thank Martha, who was helping with moderating, and Russ for just keeping us organized and just keeping the whole thing running, stopping things from catching fire and derailing, and just to make up for me overrunning earlier, I'm now going to underrun now. So I'm going to quickly wrap this up, say thank you all for watching and for engaging as well. Absolutely great. It's great to know there are people out there willing to listen to us and to see our work and to ask us questions, engage with the stuff that we have put a lot of time and effort into making. Also big thank you to everyone at Goldsmiths who I'd say that they really open up our minds to the possibility of game design as an art form, and also for giving me another really good excuse to my parents that I need to play more games. Like, absolutely. And now this is the point where it goes into begging, please hire us. If people from this course don't get a job at the end of this, there's no hope for the games industry. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, David. At this time, that's a wrap for the evening. I'm going to end the live stream to YouTube now. And so those of you who are currently in the Zoom meeting, please stick around for just a moment. But yeah, so thank you all for watching, and come back tomorrow. We've got several more speakers. So we'll see you then.